Let me tell you about two women you've probably never heard of. Their names were Shiphrah and Puah. They weren't warriors, they weren't queens, they didn't command armies or rule nations. They were midwives. Ordinary women working quietly, helping life begin. They lived in a world where power flowed in one direction, downward, ruthless, absolute, and they lived at the bottom of it. But one day, the most powerful man in the world gave them an order, and obeying it would have required them to become killers. This is Egypt, around 1400 years before Christ, the most advanced empire on earth, unmatched in wealth and unmatched in power. Its monuments scraped the sky, its armies crushed resistance. Its economy was built on the backs of slaves. And at the center of it all sat Pharaoh. He wasn't just a king, he was believed to be a god, the living embodiment of divine authority. Identified with Horus, the falcon god of kingship, called the son of Ra, the sun god himself, the bridge between heaven and earth. To disobey him wasn't just illegal, it was sacrilege. It was defying the cosmic order itself. For generations, the Hebrew people had lived in Egypt. What began as refuge became dependence. What began as dependence became bondage. They built Pharaoh's cities, Pithom and Ramses, massive construction projects built with mud bricks. They shaped his bricks with bleeding hands. They labored beneath the sun until hope itself felt like a crime. Yet something strange happened. The harder Egypt oppressed them, the more the Hebrews multiplied. Exodus tells us the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. Families grew, children were born, life kept pushing forward despite the brutality. And Pharaoh noticed. What he saw was not resilience, he saw threat. Afraid that these slaves might rise, afraid they might side with Egypt's enemies in time of war, afraid that numbers might one day overpower authority. Fear always seeks control, and control always seeks obedience. So Pharaoh devised a solution, not an open massacre, not soldiers in the streets, not something that would stir rebellion, something quieter, cleaner, easier to hide. He summoned two women, Shiphrah, whose name means beauty or fair one, and Puah, whose name means splendid or one who cries out. They were likely leaders among the midwives, overseers of a guild, trusted, experienced, known by name, responsible for coordinating the care of all Hebrew births. They were present at the most vulnerable moments of life. They knew the cries of labor, the fear in a mother's eyes, the relief when a child finally breathed. In ancient Egypt, midwifery was a recognized profession. These women possessed accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. They understood the birth stool, the timing, the complications. They were skilled practitioners, not mere assistants. They were not politicians. They were not rebels. They did not see themselves as heroes. They were caretakers. And Pharaoh spoke.
When you help the Hebrew women give birth, look at the birth stool. If the child is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live.
Let that sink in. This was not rage. This was policy. State-ordered infanticide, delegated not to soldiers but to women sworn to protect life. The birth stool placed them in the perfect position. They would see the child first. They could act before the mother even knew. No witnesses, no evidence, perfect deniability. Life was to be ended at the very moment it began. And here is what Scripture does not dramatize, but history makes clear. Refusal meant death. Exposure meant execution. Silence meant complicity. Shiphrah and Puah did not argue. They did not protest. They did not refuse Pharaoh directly in that throne room. Because wisdom sometimes knows this: defiance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. The Bible tells us why they couldn't comply. But the midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. That sentence is easy to read, harder to live. Because fearing God did not remove danger, it did not guarantee safety, it did not promise survival. To fear God meant allegiance. It meant choosing who had ultimate authority over their lives. It meant believing that God's judgment mattered more than Pharaoh's wrath. And so, when the moment came, when a Hebrew woman cried out in labor, when blood and pain and fear filled the room, they chose life. They cleaned the baby, they wrapped him, they placed him into his mother's arms, again and again and again. Repeated obedience. Dozens of times, maybe hundreds. Each birth was a silent act of rebellion. Each child a declaration that God's authority stood higher than Pharaoh's. Every saved life increased the risk. Every act of mercy multiplied danger. They went home each night knowing discovery meant death. They lived with the weight of that knowledge, and they returned anyway. Because sustained defiance is never invisible. Eventually, Pharaoh noticed. The numbers didn't add up. The population kept growing. So he summoned them again.
Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?
This was not curiosity. It was accusation. And this is where their wisdom shines. They didn't accuse. They didn't preach. They didn't challenge his power directly. They answered him using his own prejudice.
The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous. They give birth before we arrive.
It was brilliant. They didn't deny the order. They reframed the narrative. They took Pharaoh's dehumanization of the Hebrews and used it as their defense. They implied the Hebrew women were too strong, too quick, too animal-like to control. And Pharaoh accepted it, because even tyrants need their worldview to make sense. He let them go. 2 women stood before a god king and walked away alive. The Bible then tells us something extraordinary. God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Some scholars believe this means God established households for them, dynasties, legacy, future, honor. They preserved life, and life was preserved for them. And among the boys they protected was one who would grow up to confront Pharaoh himself, one who would demand freedom, one who would lead an exodus. His name was Moses. Without Shiphrah and Puah, there would be no Moses. Without Moses, no Exodus. Without the Exodus, the entire story of redemption changes. 2 women, quiet acts of disobedience, the hinge point of history. Here is something history never forgot. The Bible records the names of the midwives, Shiphrah, Puah. But Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, is never named. Power fades, courage endures. 2 women, no weapons, no wealth, no status, only conviction. They feared God more than they feared a king, and because of that, a nation lived. Historians call this the first recorded act of civil disobedience in human history. Not with armies, not with protests, but with the quiet, repeated choice to preserve life when the law demanded death. And now the question comes to us. Where are you being asked to obey Pharaoh instead of God? Where is silence being rewarded and obedience being punished? Because every generation faces this choice, and every generation needs Shiphrah, needs Puah. Maybe that calling has found you. If this story stayed with you, if something in it felt familiar, you don't have to face it alone. Below this video, you'll find a few carefully chosen resources that align with the heart of this story. Not quick fixes, not empty motivation, just thoughtful material meant to help you reflect clearly and move forward with purpose. Explore them if you feel led. Ignore them if you don't. Either way, thank you for spending this time with us.